Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Couch Reviews. These days, when people think about big-budget blockbuster action movies, more likely than not, superheroes are the first things that come to mind. You've got Marvel's multi-film Avengers experiment, Sony's ever-rebooting Spider-Man, and Warner Bros. DC with Batman and Batman. Thing is, people forget that this isn't a recent phenomenon, one that's limited to mainstream American comics, or even to actual heroes. Case in point, let's look at today's example of classical Italian supervillainy, Mario Bava's Danger Diabolik. Sorry. This is Diabolik, a professional thief and rubber mask aficionado who has made a career of robbing from the world's wealthy elite to give to himself and his lover and accomplice Ava Kent. Pursued by ace detective Inspector Jinko, Diabolik pulls off one elaborate heist after another, embarrassing the police and pissing off government ministers and organized crime alike in his endless search for thrills and riches. Now, most of you have probably never heard of this guy. Unless you happen to be from Italy, in which case you know him as one of the most popular comic book characters in that country's history. Created in 1962 by two Milanese sisters, Angela and Luciana Giussani, Diabolik has been in continuous print from its inception to this very day, with over 800 issues to date. And it's had the impact you'd expect for such a long-running series, influencing everything from comics and fashion to cartoons and music videos. So I guess the question here is, how exactly did a murderous criminal become so popular? There's always been a tradition in European pop culture of the heroic super-criminal, including well-known characters such as Arsène Lupin, Fantomas, and of course Mr. Diabolik here. In Italy, this tradition found a cozy home in the growing market for comic books that had developed there since the end of World War II. And the way that war came to an end is a major reason as to why Italian and American comic books are so different from one another. The Allied victory in 1945 in a sense confirmed the validity of their society and values, at least to themselves. Institutions such as government, the military, and law enforcement were held in high esteem, a view that would last until the late 60s, early 70s with the conflict in Vietnam. The comic books that reflected this culture featured for the most part stalwart, truth and justice style crime-fighting heroes, Superman being the iconic example. Italy, on the other hand, lost the war following more than 2 decades under Mussolini's fascist dictatorship. Naturally, in the wake of this, Italian culture was far more skeptical and cynical about their authority figures, which was reflected in their popular culture. For example, here's John Ford, and here's Sergio Corbucci. See the difference? In this context, it isn't that surprising that a character whose whole modus operandi is to make a mockery of the rich and powerful in as stylish a manner as possible would touch a nerve in the Italian psyche. Nor is it a surprise that in 1968, Dino De Laurentiis' production company would commission a film adaptation. And for good measure, he hired the perfect man for the job, Mario Bava. By 1968, Bava had already directed over 20 movies, as well as having established himself as a talented cinematographer and special effects artist. He's also the man directly responsible for kickstarting the giallo film genre with The Girl Who Knew Too Much in 1963 and the classic Blood and Black Lace the next year. Combine that expertise with a keen eye for visuals, and it was a good bet that Danger Diabolik would at least look good. That it turned out as well as it did is just the cherry on top. Danger Diabolik was made at a time when CGI was just a twinkle in someone's eye, and as a result relies entirely on practical special effects. In fact, Bava was so good at this kind of thing that of the $3 million he was given to make the movie, he only used $400,000. Not that you can tell by looking at it, though. The film has a great sense of depth and scale that helps give it that bigger-than-life comic book feel. A lot of that comes from the use of vintage special effects such as matte paintings and camera perspective tricks. For instance, this shot of Diabolik's car entering his underground hideout was done by simply placing the miniature trap door right in front of the camera while the car went down a shallow slope further away, creating the illusion of a vehicle-sized secret entrance. Later on, once they get inside, the whole left portion of this set was painted onto glass with scaffolding behind it, allowing Miss Kent to move from the foreground up into the visual effect itself. Additionally, animated sequences like this one were used to act as ellipses for longer events. Inspector Jinko's scribbling on a map coincides with his men's operations against organized crime. Meanwhile, the mob uses a facial reconstruction device to help a witness ID Eva, leading to this cavalcade of faces that ends on an image of Miss Kent straight out of the comics themselves. Now, I freely admit that I'm a little bit biased in this movie's favor. I mean, after all, it's right next to my head. But I definitely think that it's one of the best comic book movie adaptations I've ever seen.
Time to prove to your friends that you're worth a damn.
Yes, including that one. For one thing, Danger Diabolik sticks closely to the format of a serialized comic book. Unlike the big-budget comic book movies of today, which more often than not rely on a clear three-act structure, the story here is told in a picaresque fashion, more like a sequence of short stories with their own arcs than a single unified whole. Overall, these consist of 3 loosely connected, increasingly daring heists, a $10 million money transfer, a priceless emerald necklace, and finally a 20-ton gold ingot. One thing about this guy, he doesn't think small. All these robberies were directly lifted from the original comic books, in terms of both the events and the iconic imagery. Whether it's Diabolik scaling a castle tower, escaping the cops with a catapult-based fake-out, or blowing up a bridge to send a gold-laden train into the drink, the filmmakers remained very faithful to the original source material during their adaptation. And that goes for the characters as well, especially where the main cast is concerned. As with many Italian productions of this era, the cast is a mix of various nationalities: American, Austrian, French, British, and Italian. John Philip Law and Marissa Mell, as Diabolik and Eva Kent, are pitch perfect in their respective roles, with a special tip of the hat to Law since he actually looks pretty much exactly like his character in the comic books. And because his previous role was Pygar in Barbarella.
How awful.
It no longer matters. It's all in the past.
Because why not? Michel Piccoli plays Inspector Jinko as an intelligent and competent investigator, never coming across as a buffoon no matter how many times his arch-nemesis gets the better of him. That job goes to Terry Thomas's bumbling clown of a minister. Finally, veteran actor Adolfo Celli gives a mob boss Ralph Valmont just the right mix of menace and humor.
I told you I'd cross your name off the human register. Liar!
One thing that was changed for the movie was that the violence was toned down somewhat compared to the comics, where Diabolik can be especially cruel at times. Not that you necessarily notice. I say that because he still pulls out his iconic throwing knives to kill the occasional innocent police officer. Not to mention what he does to the country's tax offices. Yeah. There's a reason his nickname is the King of Terror. You'd think that it'd be hard to enjoy a movie which follows or even glorifies an avowed terrorist as its central hero. On the contrary, there's never really any moment during the film where we're not rooting for Diabolik. A lot of that can be ascribed to the fact that he's the protagonist, and therefore the audience is naturally inclined to be on his side. On the other hand, it might just be that the way he goes about his villainy is just so damn cool and stylish that we just can't help but like the guy. He's not robbing people and wreaking havoc for some ideology or even petty greed. He's doing it for the sheer fun of it. I mean, just look at where he lives. Does this look like a guy who needs money? And when he's not out stealing, he's pulling elaborate pranks on government officials and having sex on a giant rotating bed covered in money. How could we not love this guy? Besides, I don't think anyone was really that sad that he blew up all the tax records. Unless you're that guy.
Let each come forward voluntarily to pay the tax he thinks he owes.
Fuck that guy. Danger Diabolik is one of those films that I gladly watch over and over again just for my own enjoyment. It looks wonderful, has a great, exciting story, and to top it all off, it's got a score by Ennio Morricone of all people. When it comes to comic book movies, few are as respectful to their source material and as high quality, especially considering how little it costs to make. So if you were looking for an antidote to the brooding seriousness of today's superhero cinema, look no further than the colorful amorality of Italy's greatest super criminal. I'm Bastian, and I'll see you next time on the couch.